Hi everyone, my name is Jolene Martin and I'm absolutely honored to be deployed as the moderator for this panel discussion. Thank you so much to the Encounters team for including Khoekhoe Saga. We are just so moved by what's happening with this film. To everybody who is watching, we would like to urge and encourage you to be part of this discussion. So use your chat box, send us questions and comments. It's going to be a robust and fun conversation. Then also, I think I want to mention the fact that it is Father's Day today. And it's not lost on me that we are launching Khoekhoe Saga on a day where we are focusing on heritage and bloodline. So today we get to honor our mothers and fathers of the First Nation. I am joined by two very special people to me, but my esteemed panelists. Firstly, Johann Abrams, who was the director of Khoekhoe Saga, and RIEGER, the producer. Gentlemen, congratulations. You made the film, it's here.
Thanks, Jolene.
You are most welcome.
And thanks to Encounters for getting us in there and making this available to people to watch on a big scale, on nationally, at least.
Indeed, indeed. The project, it goes way beyond the 67 minutes we've just seen, Johann. Could you possibly just elaborate on how much data was collected and how much footage we have?
Yes, obviously, I mean, 67 minutes. How do you cram people's history, 200,000 years of history or more, into one film? It was absolutely a big challenge. And remember that this is part of a 13-part series. The 13-part series will be screened at a later date on a broadcaster that we will announce. So out of that, I looked at the series and I thought, let's pull together a film that we can show, that we can take around, because it's not very practical with a 13 series. A film that we can show that will tell the real history of South Africa. Now, like you said, a massive task. You don't know what to leave in and what to leave out. So a lot of it, I had to be very hard on myself in leaving out certain parts, which I afterwards would think I should have let that in. But you know, somewhere you need to cut. And I think I've hit most of the high points of the series. It's a history that starts before Van Riebeeck came. I mean, that's not where our history started. And it goes on until today, and that's all reflected in the film. So yes, I used the story of Sarah Bartman to bookend it, because I believe that she was, in many ways, the catalyst for a lot of the revivalists that have come out now and put the Khoekhoe Saga on the agenda of the country. So yeah, I hope people enjoy the film and have enjoyed it, those that have seen it now.
Thank you, Johann. Rudy, I'm going to ask the motivation question of you first, and then I'll ask the same question of Johann. What was your motivator for getting into this project and embarking on this mammoth task?
Initially, it wasn't planned like this. It was in 2004 when I just saw that the big boulder in Mamre at the Moravian church, and asking the responsible people there, they taught me that was the boulder, the stone where the slaves got sold. So that suddenly it got to me, and that's when everything started. I did intense research, and thereafter I joined various groups of the Khoi, for instance, the Khoekhoe tribe and other tribes, and I participated active every day, every month, and and recorded everything. So that is where it started.
Okay, thank you, Rudy. And Johan, your motivator, I know that you grew up in Genatendal, which was actually an ancient Khoekhoe village, right?
Yeah, Genatendal is the oldest mission station, I think, south of, yeah, in Africa. 1737, goes back, way back when Schmidt came there. And I'm a descendant of the first people, one of the first people that were baptized. But my interest, of course, then over the years, I've made many films about the Khoi and the history, and especially around Genatendal and mission stations everywhere, Wuppertal. But I always thought, let me bring it together in one film, because also there's a lot of ignorance about the history of the Khoekhoe. And so besides my interest, I really thought that, you know, there's the story of the heroes, Khoekhoe heroes, that's never been told. A lot of them footnotes in history. People like Dan Perel, Zara Schmelen, the woman that translated the Bible into Nama. Khoekhoe, my personal hero is Khoekhoe. I'm really fascinated about how he resisted the Dutch way back in the 1700s. So these stories needed to be told, and so over the years I developed this passion to do this, and it culminated in the meeting with Rudy, who a mutual friend put us in the same room, and we discussed going forward from 2010 onwards to secure funding. And so kudos to Rudy, who kept going, believing in the story, and finally made the breakthrough to get us the necessary funding to make the series, and then afterwards the film.
Thank you for that, Johan. I'm going to read the comments and the questions as they come up from people who are in the room with us so that we can tackle them as they come through. From Facebook, we have something from Mama Chine, and she says, "Thank you for this beautiful offering and memorial. I've learned so much." And she goes on to ask, what is the rollout plan for the other parts? And how can more people see this and learn too?
If I can answer that, we are in talks with the SABC. So we're waiting on a response from them. And if that's favorable, it will be probably on one of their channels, probably SABC2, which I think it would sit very well. And that'll be a 13-part series of 24 minutes each episode, starting with episode 1, which will delve into the origin, or I mean, not the origin, but where do the Khoekhoe come from? Where did they evolve from? As I remember, the Khoi were also Bushman's son, as they are called now, who were hunter-gatherers who evolved into people with cattle and sheep, and they then migrated south. So yeah, we hope that this story will be rolled out on a platform like the SABC. We're just waiting on them to come to the party.
I like that Mama Chine via Facebook has said, how can more people learn from this? And she has learned so much. Johann, as an investigative journalist, I know that it was imperative to you to get those facts right. And both you and Rudy went on an extensive search to speak to professors, scientists, thought leaders, houses, chiefs of royal houses. What was the process like to get those people secured for those interviews?
Yes, I started talking to them obviously long before the camera started rolling, and people like Professor Nigel Penn, who wrote, obviously I read a lot of material, and from that I started developing a list of possible contributors. And most of them, I mean, actually all of them, were very, very eager to be part of this film. People like Nigel Penn, Professor Jady Bredenkamp, Dr. Villa Busak, Michael de Jong, who's an expert on the Hessequas, Russell Viljoen, very thankful for him for his contribution about the story of Jan Perl that nobody knows about. Not even people in Swellendam knows the story. So getting them all on board started giving me the storyline, which, you know, when we tell stories, we documentary storytellers, you need a train or you need a character. In this historical film, there is no character, there's multiple characters. So you have to deal with, but in the end, what came through was that the character in this case is the Khoekhoe nation, the Khoekhoe people. And we follow that train of them from northern Botswana migrating south into the coastal plains where they became herders, very successful herders, until a major disruption in 1652.
Yes, Rudy.
I may add that Aaron Messeler, you know, the High Commissioner of the Griqua from the north, he was born in Canberra, and he opened us many doors to the real people, you know, to the real people. Not the academics is a different story, you know, they're telling about their topics and so on, but I think the Johann and Jolene, I think you would support this, that was the real experience of the people. They are entirely different to those who we are confronted with in Cape Town, for instance, in the city. So in the rural area, there's, I must say, I learned a lot, and I loved the people, and it was a real experience. And that is mainly due to Aaron's support and contacts prior we went to the place. So when we arrived, we were already welcome.
Indeed, we were welcomed with open arms, and I'd like to touch on that a bit later. I would like to go to some Facebook comments that have come through. One being from, I'm actually not sure if this is Facebook or YouTube. I know we're going through various platforms today, but Alberic Valmer says, great documentary, well done. My question is there enough data to do an even deeper, in-depth documentary of the different groups?
Well, I would say contemporary information we have from for instance, Aaron Messeler, who I think he's working, he released his third book, or was it only 2 books? I think I read 2 books of his, and he's working on the third one. So he opens up with customs within the tribal environment, and everything happens still today as it used to be in the past. So there is still the past is inherited by the present, and it's going on. Johann, what would you add to this?
Yes, to answer that question, there's a lot that can be done still to go deep. Just in Genadendal, for instance, we're looking at the missionary diaries. Some of those diaries are available in Genadendal at the museum, but I've read them all. And there are other diaries that's sitting in Germany that wasn't translated, has not been translated yet. But even if you read these that are there, there's a lot of information there about the Khoi, the way of living which will give you then a way of how the Hessequas and their customs. Remember, each of these groups have different customs even, or different ways of burial. For instance, the ones in Genadendal, from what I've read there, the burial, the custom, the way they bury people, it is very similar to the Eastern people, where they face east and the person is put in a grave, but with a hollowed in a bottom part, and it's almost like cave-like, putting in almost like a cave, like Middle Eastern people would bury, or Muslim people in Cape Town would do. And then the person would be in a secluded area. There's no sand that's thrown on top of the person. Then they fill up the grave. And then it's packed with the stones, which everybody that passes, if you pass by there, you would put a stone on top. And all these things are described in those diaries very accurately. Remember, the Khoi didn't write anything down. So we have to rely on these documents. So if you sift through documents sitting here in the Cape Archives, you are going to find a lot of information, but you need funding, you need the time to actually go and unearth that.
Indeed. I love this question that has come through on social media. This one is from Marius Fransman, and this touches on something which is very close to my heart, and I didn't realize it until I presented the documentary for you, that this was such a massive issue for me. But Marius says, was such an experience to watch this living history. Hope our children in schools will have benefit to see this. Now, the reason I say, ooh, giving me goosebumps. The reason, ooh, I was very emotional when we were filming this documentary, and we filmed it over years. But to be honest, it did make me a little bit resentful that I learned none of it when I was in high school. So all of the various history textbooks that I had all the way through my schooling career didn't touch on any of these first frontier wars, skirmishes, battles that took place here at the Cape. We learned about the confrontations in the interior, right? So I don't want to answer the question, but Johann, I know that was a touch point for you as well. And do you hope that this documentary will speak to and influence history textbooks? Yes,
to answer the question, we're definitely gonna take the film into communities where we filmed. We're just working on that logistics though, to take the film to those communities and to have screening at those communities where we probably won't screen just the film, but also the episodes that came out of those. Like for instance, if we in Springbok and in Khoekhoe, we would screen episode 11 and 12, which was dealing with the Namas, which is an extensive part of the Nama history. And so we will take it to those communities, and the children and the school children will be able to watch it. Maybe even the SABC could put it on the education channel. Besides on the other channels, we could run it on the education channel, which would then get children, more young people to watch it. What was the other point? That was the how we're going to roll it out to those communities.
Well, Marius was just asking about, he's saying that he's hoping that children in schools will get to see it as well.
Yeah, that would be a conversation with the Department of Education, which we have discussed. How can we get it into schools where kids will actually watch it and during history period.
Fantastic. We've got a question, and someone is actually reaching out to you, Johann, is Reba, and she says, or he, a very touching narrative for me. How can I get hold of Johann, as I'm keen on screening this film to as many people as possible?
Well, you can, you get in touch with me? I'm not going
to drop your email address, Johann?
JOHANN58@gmail.com.
There you go.
Johann. But it's very easy to get hold of me, besides just Google. There's probably on the site, on the website, I think the information will be there. I'm not sure.
Yeah. There's a lovely question that has come through here. Johann, you did say that this might get controversial. So Johann and Rudy, are you ready? Would you like to have a sip of water?
I knew there was going to be some controversy.
Yes, indeed, sir. And here we go.
And we love that.
Yes, we do. We do love controversy. This is from Turoja, Denver. Ainte ai gangan to everybody who's watching. That is the Khoisan greeting in Khoekhoe. Ainte. So, to everyone involved, I beg your pardon?
It is from Khoekhoe.
That's right. That is Johann's indigenous name.
No, from Cape Town. People, where the clouds gather.
Beautiful. It goes on to say, everyone involved in this production, thank you. It gave a lot of insight, but I find it a bit over-reliant on the white, settler, colonial academic voice. And if I hear correctly, that funding was sourced by this German producer. Why was this? Why was it impossible to create this work without any colonial support?
I don't know if Rudy want to answer that first.
Look, okay, maybe I should. I should. It's quite an important approach, you know. During the course of development, I had different directors in line. There were two other directors, and then Priscilla de Wet, a Khoi activist. She introduced me to Johann, who still worked at the SABC those days. And then, look, a producer is just like a glorified project manager. And I got trained in running big projects. So when I bumped into Johann, and I thought, this is it. It must be, because I had all mainly white people as the crew in the beginning. So with Johann, then I thought, this is a man who is an educated journalist, and he has got that approach. He is a Khoi descendant, and then suddenly everything changed. You know, I think from the crew we had only one white other colonist who was a sound guy. So I think why that question, why it's wasn't it done by the right people from the beginning? You know, the thing, it doesn't really matter for me, white or black or green or yellow doesn't exist. We are all praying to the same God. We are all under the same sun. We are all one. We have different, anyway, we don't want to go more into details. So I think that person who raised the question must give his own or her own answer.
Can I answer?
Yes, of course.
Look, let's start with the funding. I mean, funding is funding. I mean, actually Lotto funded this project. So it's South African public money that funded this program. On the other hand, there are academics that was used in the making of this film. They happen to be white, but you have to look at the content of what they've written and what they've researched. And you have to remember and acknowledge that this film is told by a direct descendant of the Khoekhoe. I'm a Hesekwa descendant. So I'm telling the story. I'm merely using people like a Professor Nigel Penn, whom I respect as a scholar. And it's not his opinion that I'm using. I'm using his research, which is documented, which you can go and read yourself. You don't even have to read his books. You can go into National Archives or Cape Archives, and you can go and read the documents of the VOC at the time. But even that, we read it with caution. And if you watch the film carefully, you'll even hear Penn saying, He doesn't trust all the sources. He doesn't trust the VOC documents. So we read it between the lines. And then I had Jati Brenenkamp, who's a respected scholar and researcher and writer, who wrote a lot of material about the Khoi in books. And I relied on him. And then there's Aaron Messelaar's contribution. People like Ron Martin, an activist, who a huge chunk of the stories told in the first 2 episodes is actually told by Ron Martin. If you watch the film carefully, you'll see there is no European hand in this or Eurocentric view. We even question the missionaries and their role. If you watch the part, and we have 2 chapters about that. In the film, it may be a short piece where Brenenkamp, Puzak, talks about the role of the missionaries. And we question their impact, the fact that they changed people's names. They took people's Khoekhoe names and gave them Christian names or European names when they are Christianized. So we are questioning their role and their contribution to actually stripping the Khoi of their culture. And you can go right through it. If you watch carefully, you'll see that this is a story. This is the first time a comprehensive document told from a different perspective. So watch the series as well, and you'll see that coming through, because there you can go into more detail.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Rudy, did you want to add something?
No, let me add something to it. If we go back in his history, when Van Riebeck, 1652, or before this, there were hardly any indigenous people who had the skill to write. So history was written by the colonists, mainly.
And now it's being rewritten.
It's rewritten.
Let me go.
Frame
Yes.
by frame.
Frame by frame, rewritten frame by frame. I love that, Johann. I'd like to go to 2 more comments and questions coming through here. First of all, thank you to everyone in the room. Thank you to our viewers and our larger community for sending in these incredible questions and comments. They are greatly appreciated. We thought we were just going to be a few filmmakers having a conversation, but something did tell me that you guys would want to get in on this. So this one comes from Stephen Taylor, and he says, I don't think only children need to be educated on this, but the whole of South Africa, as this is a part of South Africa's history. It should be known by all. I couldn't agree with you more, Stephen Taylor. Then Eba says something again, and she says, I would start with screening it in the Sarah Baartman district. Great idea. I actually have an MOU with the Department of Education to take films to the schools. It looks like Eba is not going to email you, Johann, but all questions will come through on this platform. Those are absolutely beautiful. Yes, Johann.
Thanks, Eba. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person.
Well, it looks like that's what Encounters does. Even during COVID, there is virtual networking taking place. I wanted to ask you, gentlemen, bringing to life an historical film is not easy. It really isn't easy. Talk to us about some of the challenges and how you overcame them.
Look, it's tough to do. I study a lot of historical films because I love the genre, and and I've watched films, the American ones especially, where they tell, and they make use of a lot of recreations to bring the story to life, because you have no visual images to rely on like your other filmmakers can do. So you have to recreate, but you also don't want to do some cheesy recreations. You want to make it, you want to give the viewer a hint to what it may have looked like then. and also to just keep the interest. Because, you know, our battle is with talking heads as filmmakers. We don't want a person's face on the screen for longer than 20 seconds. So immediately you have that problem. What do I show? Because Van Riebeeck landed, or Khoekhoe consulting with his people, how do you show that? Because you don't have that record. So the problem was that we didn't obviously have the budget like the Americans have to do those big, huge battle scenes with armies when they do a recreation. We didn't have that. We have a small recreation in the film, and that was done on a shoestring budget. But you need deep pockets to do recreations. But we managed, I think, somehow to get through it. Obviously, when we do another one, we'll try to bring in recreations and to keep, just to stimulate the interest and to keep the interest. There are a lot of written records, but like we said before, it's really not very reliable. You have to a pinch of salt when you rely on those written records that you find in the archives.
If I may, Johann, and this ties into the challenges that one faces when bringing to life an historical story, but there would be mornings where we, as the crew, would be up really early around the breakfast table, getting ready to go out on a day of shooting, and we'd wonder where on earth you were. And what I learned was that as an investigative journalist, your nose told you where a possible lead was. So you would go off and investigate that lead while we were on the shoot. So not all the research can take place ahead of time. Was that part of the challenge of filming this? Was this constant need to keep up with the data that was coming your way?
Yeah, look, there's sometimes a lot of luck, sometimes hard work and planning, but there's also the whole thing of luck that comes your way sometimes. Well, somebody says there's no such thing as luck, it's hard work that brings that. But when you're in that community, in those communities, you often talk to people and then they refer you to somebody and say, but why don't you speak to that one as well, or that one? And then you stumble on people that you haven't even thought of or didn't come across in the first visit, and they bring an unexpected twist to your story. Very interesting was for me, the very interesting in Namaqualand was the meeting with Oma Bali, which we were trying to contact before we went, but we didn't know whether we were still alive. And we didn't know that that was going to happen because of previous people that filmed there. She was not happy with appearing on film. But I think when she met JOLENE, JOLENE zoned in on her and they became friends. And it worked, you know. So if you watch that piece about the two of them walking, where she talks about her great-great-grandfather, the great Abraham Vigeland, who was a Khoekhoe leader, and she talks about the old man, how he trekked from dorpie to dorpie and drinking the milk of the cow that he was traveling on. I mean, that's priceless. That we didn't plan. That was organic, coming out of the situation that we found ourselves in.
Yes, and I mentioned earlier that we would touch on it, and I'll touch on it very briefly, but part of the challenge was we all discovered that because our people were the subjects of research, because we've had our ancestors' bones and skulls and remains dug up, shipped across the ocean, and we've had to go through so much to bring them back. Naturally and understandably, there was this defensiveness. People did not want to be interviewed. They did not want to be photographed, much less be videoed. But it's so strange that you bring up Sarah Bali. or Oma Bali, because I've got that poster on hand right here. Look at that. And that photograph was taken by you, Rudy. I just want to go to...
One.
What's that, sir?
That's kind of an iconic one, eh?
Indeed.
Yeah.
Oh, good. I just want to read some more of the comments which have come through. This one is from Fraser Barry. I really enjoyed the docu, especially for the fact that you obviously had to sift through so much material info in order to streamline it. Thank you very much. I'm wondering how this narrative will pose a threat to the current government, who still has the descendants of the Khoi people as colored. The struggle continues. Wow, that's deep. Thank you, Fraser. Another one here from Toroga. So how accurate is Nigel Penn's 2005 Northern Frontier in Colony regarding Nama people? I'm a descendant of a Nama great-great-grandfather. Before we get to answering how accurate Professor Penn's book is, I'd like to go to the last comment I see here, just in case we run out of time. I'd love to get to everything that's coming through. This one is from Lace Cardlese. Amazing film, very educational. I've learned so much about my culture in just a matter of minutes. As a young person of color from the Cape Flats, I've had conversations with people from different races telling me I don't have a culture, or I don't know where I come from. Statements like these, especially in that instance, I found that I couldn't exactly fight back on comments such as those, because I do have very little knowledge about my culture. The question to you, Johann, here is, have you had a similar situation or instance? And if so, how exactly would you go about answering or responding to such comments?
I was thinking now about the first question, and that is Nigel Penn, which stuck now with me. The Nigel Penn and how accurate that was. Nigel is, I mean, Professor Penn, if you read him, he's the first one to say that we don't know. We actually don't know the real story. We can only rely on written records. And most of these records comes from VOC, or come from the VOC officials writing to one another. Like the governor at the Cape, he's got a commissioner, or he has a magistrate sitting in Kenhardt or in Springbok, and they would write to each other about an issue somewhere there, a disturbance or a land issue, and that's where what they use or use as their to write what they put in their books, and also records from travel records, like Van der Stel's travel to the interior. And I've read these things as well. But you cannot trust the documents because it's written, it is documents and diaries that they send to their bosses in Amsterdam. And when you write to your boss a report, I mean, you know that you're not going to write the bad things that happen. You're going to whitewash and sanitize that report to make it look good and make yourself look good. And that's what we're sitting with. So it's important when we read those Dutch records, it's important to read between the lines, like even Penn says it, Nigel Penn says it. So we can criticize his writings, but remember that he's also trying to sift through the BS that's in those records. The second question, part of the question, was about getting people asking me about my history.
The second one, I actually can't remember. I've already gone on to the next one here.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But what do people question me about my history?
Oh yes, she was saying that she gets people saying that as a so-called Khalid, she has no culture. How do you how do you respond to something like that?
How do you respond to something like that, Jolene?
Well, I actually just responded today about it on Instagram. So I don't want to read the post, but what I said was that due to the fact that we have been subjects of scientific research and that we've had to go through such exorbitant lengths in order to retrieve the bones of our ancestors, we have become a very insular community. So we've kind of dropped a veil which keeps the outside world out. And I discovered when we went into areas in the Orange River, River, and so forth, the culture is very much alive there, but they've kept outsiders out. So for us as descendants, it is our job to return, go and discover what our real culture is. And then we'll be able to respond to those accusations and those comments. Thank you for throwing that question back to me, Johann. That was a very nice move there, sir.
Oh, it's your pet question, that one.
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. Very quickly, I know that Lynette Amaro is based in Portugal. So this is really interesting that as a so-called colored female, she is writing this question from Portugal, from another country. And she says, as a so-called colored person, rediscovering my identity as Khoekhoe, what would be your encouragement in terms of next steps? So she's starting this journey of rediscovering who she really is. What do you feel she should do as her first steps?
I think we cannot begin to understand the full history of the Khoekhoe, and important is for us to keep digging into our history and go through those records and go and visit places like this, the Cape Town archives and the ones in Amsterdam, and to read that and to use your own imagination of what really happened. But I forgot that point that I wanted to make. I wanted to say that we must also, I'm also guarded against the whole thing of Khoekhoe and this is us. And we are insulated from the other groups. We are not, because we are Khoekhoe. We came over the Gari. We brushed with, we had a lot of influences or a lot of contact with other groups as we came south. Do you know that in the Drakensberg area, there are more Khoekhoe paintings, drawings? Remember, they did engravings, not drawings as such. There are more there than anywhere in the country. So the common belief is that we were just here, south of the Keiskamma. Just remember that word, the river, they call it the Keiskamma still today. That's a Khoekhoe word. So that means Kamma meaning water, Kais meaning bright water, or I think, I might be wrong, but I think it means clear water. So they were there and they were even further north. But because of the cattle or the sheep preferring a certain vegetation, that's why they settled more in the coastal areas. But they were not only here, they were further up north as well. That's why the influences with other groups, the Xhosas and the Khoya cousins or brothers, even closer, because they are tribes that are Khoi and Xhosa mixed. If you can go into that history. And then with the Sothos, the Tswanas, there's a mixture there. We are all one, actually. We are all, I mean, the Khoi is just, we are just telling the story of this particular group. But in our veins, we are all South African and we are connected in that way. And the sun, don't forget about the sun. We didn't tell that story because that's so huge. But if you look at the sun, we are all connected. They are the first people on earth, sort of, the first Homo sapiens. They developed religion as we have it today, almost.
Thank you so much, Johann. This is such a beautiful post that has come up here, and it says, "Thank you, Johann, Rudolf, and Jolene, and everyone that was involved with this documentary. A special word of thanks to my leader in the Khoekhoe Royal House, High Commissioner Aaron Messelaar, for his input in the making of this documentary. My question to you, Johann, do you think that this documentary may or can assist us in addressing the false colored identity or label, and going forward help us as descendants of the Khoi and San to embrace our true indigenous African identity?"
Yes, definitely. I think especially the series where we go into in-depth, we look at DNA, for instance. Professor Michael de Jong does a lot of DNA testing, tested a lot of people up north in the Riversdale area, which he found to be 70% Khoi. These people are classified as colored, but their DNA proved their direct line to the Khoi that originated in northern Botswana. And even the Namas, there are skeletons that were found on the coast near Paternoster. Those skeletons, those remains all point to a direct connection with the Khoi people from the north, from northern Botswana. And if you watch the film, you will obviously know how they migrated, the influence that they had from Lake Malawi, from the Malawians, herders that came south. That's why we find those DNA, that DNA, traces of Malawian, of their DNA in our veins here in the Cape.
Rudy, would you like to add on to that, sir?
Rudy fell asleep.
Okay, I'm online again. No, let's thank you, Johann. That was a very good explanation. Maybe I would like to add in connection with the validity of the Nama of the story. It is everybody, the way we are here now, even now, we have our own perspective in life. So adding this to the dimensions, it's only a small little angle we can focus on, or a person focuses on. And it's hardly ever possible to get the 360 degrees out of a story. That is what I would like to say. Because there are so many different sources of information from the past. If we all put them together and fill in gaps which the other one story doesn't have, so we're slowly getting to a good cake. Now thinking about all the ingredients necessary to cook something properly. So that's the same with the stories. Giving up finally a story which covers all the 360 degrees, but it's going to be a book like this, most probably.
Absolutely. We are going towards the end of the show now, or towards the end of the panel discussion. This is a lovely one that's come through from Charlene Martin. This film is raising many questions. I would ask Johann to expand more on the religious aspects he mentioned. Oh, that's fascinating. You're muted, Johann.
It's a pity we don't have Dr. Villa Busak. Is Dr. Villa Busak in the house? Well, but we can't hear him if he can only post, right?
He could post a comment or a question, yes.
And then you can read it, because I have been in contact with him, and I thought he would join this panel. He very eloquently describes, which is an area which he did a lot of research in, is about the spiritual life of not only the Khoi, but also the San. And he also explained how Khoi was so quick to adapt to Christianity and not the San. So the Khoi adapted or embraced Christianity very quickly in Genadendal, for instance, because they had a similar history, a similar religion already in place. They just had different names for God.
So the concept of monotheism.
That was, they were believing in one God, number one. They also believed in an evil one, the devil, Gaunap, or some, I might have the name wrong, Gaun something, and that the evil one, which is the Satan. There's even talks of a virgin birth in their story. The creation story is similar to our story that we believe in, that's in the Bible. Now, remember that these people developed the concept of God, the concept of religion. They were the first Homo sapiens. They had to come up with something. And this is what they have, what they came up with was what we have today, almost like Christianity is very similar. That's what I'm trying to say. That's why they adapted to it so quickly. The Jesus figure, they call him, they had a name for him and they call him the one with the wounded knee. But like I said, it's not I'm not an expert on that, but Dr. Busak, that's why I relied heavily on him in 2 chapters to delve into the spiritual life of the Khoi. And you mentioned earlier the the praying mantis, which appeared there in your room. Now, the Khoi they didn't pray to the praying mantis. They respected him because it was for them a personification, I think, of God or of a God. They didn't worship this animal. They didn't kill it, and I think they stood still when it came across their path. But there is a sinister thing about the praying mantis, but I think it was more a sense of respect for life, for creatures created by the superior being.
Indeed. I did find a praying mantis in my living room for no reason today in the middle of winter. And that to me was a good omen. The ancestors, we have their blessing. Let me get through to these beautiful, beautiful comments that have come through. Let me just scroll down here. So interesting. Melvin Swart says, I also got to learn about the Khoi and San when I got to university. At first, it made me angry that we were not taught this history. Sadly, the bit we were taught at school depicted the Khoi and San as thieves. I am grateful that we are gaining more access to information to share with others. Indeed, Melvin, we are not only restoring language and the real history, we are also restoring pride. And I talk a lot about this on social media as well. There's a reason, we've got great reason to walk with our heads high and our shoulders out. We are born of kings and queens and warriors. Another one here from Charlene Houston says, congratulations, Johann and team, well timed to stimulate thinking ahead of the next national census. This year, people do not have to tick the colored box in the census. Stats SA has advised that the manner in which the question on race is posed will allow people to classify themselves in whichever group they identify with, said Cooperative Governance Minister Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. That's amazing because I sent Stats SA a long email asking for an interview for exactly that. So change is a coming.
The Khoekhoe were written off out of stats in 1850, somewhere there, where there were Khoi people around 100,000, maybe more. I'm not sure about the figures. But suddenly, 5 years later, there was no more Khoi left in the Cape. They disappeared completely, and it was simply done by some officials that changed the census. It's also in the film, and especially in the series, we deal with it through the very eloquent Patrick Maley. You must also read his book, The Lie of the Land, 1650, The Lie of 1652. The Lie of 1652. That's the title of the book by Patrick Maley. His contribution to the film and the series is also immense, and he talks a lot about the census and how over the years the Khoi was systematically removed from the census and replaced with a common name, colored. So bringing that back is historical and huge.
That really is massive. Before we get to the end of our discussion, I felt, I know you felt, and as I'm saying we're coming to the end of the discussion, more comments and questions are coming through. We knew this would happen though. I was going to say, I felt when presenting, and I know you gentlemen felt it as well, we felt that we were only scratching the surface, right? It felt like that little tip of the iceberg and we were just touching on it, right?
Yes, no, certainly. And you feel like you're cheating, you know, a little bit. Some communities, you take away some of their stories and you're not presenting their stories in full. Siirbra community, we could have gone so much more there. Also in Namakoland, you know, we had to cut out some of the, for instance, we had a wonderful evening in Komachas where we were treated to storytelling, and Jolene would remember that because she was there and she led or experienced it. Now, I couldn't put that in the film because it's you know, it's something you have to watch, like the whole thing. You can't just watch a clip because they were telling stories, funny stories. And you know, it takes, and you know how Namakolanders tell a story. I tried to be long to tell the story, so I had to cut some of that. But in the series, you can watch all of them.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Gentlemen, thank you so much for this time. And from us to Encounters, thank you once again. Thank you to all of the sponsors of Encounters, to everybody watching. You can continue finding out updates about the series and the project on, I think it's, there's a Facebook page called Roots TV on Facebook. But if you want to find out anything more about the Encounters Festival, please go to encounters.co.za. I hope I said that right and not .com. But I will make sure we get those details to you as well. That's it for this evening, gentlemen. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Rudy. Thank you, Johan.
Thanks, Rudy.
Have a big hug.
Thanks, Taryn. I mean, Taryn and Tara.
Yes, and Tara has been so wonderful. She has just typed in here. It is encounters.co.za. With that, good night. God bless.